Welcome to the Dr. Dev and Mama Sue podcast. This is part 3 of how to help your adult child leave home. We want to help you have them exit the home, to give you your house back, to be able to run around naked, to be able to have some peace and quiet for the first time in your adult life that you can remember. If you missed the first 2 parts, the first one was about whether they were really prepared to leave home. The second one was about whether they were ready to leave home and whether you were ready for them to leave home. And this third one is all about how to help them cross that threshold to get out of your house. I think the first thing to consider when it comes to helping our adult children leave home is how can we support them to leave? You know, it just can't happen overnight. Your kid turns 18 and you've done no preparation for them being on their own independently, and then you just boot them out the door. I mean, people do that, but it's not okay. You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. And so it can happen that you haven't given them any preparation, but once you realize maybe it's time for them to start thinking about moving out, it's never too late to help them prepare, I guess. If you haven't been preparing them all throughout their teen years and, even younger, with skills, you can start preparing them. And then, just like as you figure out what it is they need to know, establish a timeline, talk to them about sort of what sort of living situation do they want? Do they want to live with roommates? Do they want to rent on their own? Look at what their income is. If you never taught them to budget, maybe that's time to sit down and actually help them create a budget, so you don't really need to lament the things that they don't know, but, get busy helping them and giving them support and learning those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the education needs to go way back into their childhood. And as they're learning independence, it's important that we withdraw our help incrementally,
Right.
because you don't really know if somebody has independent living skills until they're out there doing the thing independently.
Right.
So like, for instance, when my kids were younger and I was first letting them walk out the door without me, right? Maybe they were like 10, 11 years old, right? And I made sure that they knew how to keep themselves safe out there when I wasn't with them, You've seen those scary parenting shows, right? Where people leave their kids alone at home and then actors come in
Right.
and fool them into, letting them in the door. It happens a lot. And that's after parents were drilling them over and over again to not do that, right? So the preparation needs to start really early. And I think the safety stuff has to come first when it comes to independence out in the world. How do you keep yourself safe? Does your child know how to keep themselves safe out there?
I think that's a really important point, especially the starting early with it. I think the point that I like to make here too, along with it being important to start early, if you haven't, you need to address that, but sort of give yourself some grace, because some parents, they're so focused on like, oh, I want you to get good grades and, I want you to be well-rounded, that they forget some of those independent living skills, that the kids are going to need. They're too busy doing so many things for them, just making sure that they have a good life and making sure that they're well-rounded, or making sure that they think they're going to be successful later in life because they're getting good grades. So yeah, just kind of, and also, as I said, it's never too late to go ahead and help them gain some of those skills. It's also never too late to sort of incrementally, as Sue said, incrementally withdraw the support on that. They're much older, so they're able to understand much more quickly. So you don't want to be doing everything for them. You want to set guidelines, create accountability for them to be able to do things on their own as soon as possible. Even if you're sitting with them, and helping them create, here's how you create a budget. Then as soon as they understand it, it's on them, and even sort of incrementally, as you're wanting them to leave, incrementally withdraw support in the home in a way, sort of like, okay, you're feeding yourself is your job now. If you can't figure it out, or you don't want to, cook peanut butter and jelly, you can figure that sort of thing out. So incrementally making your home maybe a little less hospitable without being cruel, but just sort of withdraw the things that you've been doing for them, make sure they're doing them on their own as you're preparing them to leave the nest.
Yeah, self-feeding is a big deal. I think a lot of moms I've known haven't wanted to withdraw that kind of support because they took a lot of joy in feeding their kids, right? But, if your child is 15 and they have never had to prepare a whole meal for themselves before, it's really about time, because if you don't start expecting them to know how to do such a basic thing by then, they're really not going to be ready by the time they're 18. Just go ahead. Let them do it. You can have the joy all the other nights that you're cooking for them. You don't have to do it every night to be a loving mother.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You think that it's, if you're getting more joy out of it, you can just figure out how to sort of wean yourself off of it because, it's really important for them to learn that. Because a lot of the times kids attach themselves to those benefits of staying at home. Also, I want to interject here a little bit of what I found in the literature too. This concept of sending kids to be out on their own, it's really kind of an American concept too. In some countries, it's like kids do naturally stay home a little bit longer, and there are benefits for them and for the parents sometimes. Sometimes they stay long enough for them to turn into the caregivers in some cases, right? So if you're in a home where it's not a problem, we're not trying to push that you must send your kids off on their own. If it's a situation that you want them there, they're gaining enough sort of life of their own and independence with being with you, and it's a comfortable situation, and there's benefits on both sides, evaluate that too. You needn't kind of do this just because society says that you should, or that we're giving you, advice on how to do it, So make up your own mind as to what works for your family.
Yeah, these videos are meant for people who want their children to leave home, but they're not. Or for parents whose kids want to leave home, but they're not really ready for them to leave. These are videos for people who really want their children to be able to leave home and be successfully launched out into the world, And I really feel like the age at which that's appropriate really varies depending on the child, because just as, we're told as our kids are growing up, that development is very individual. It's true at this stage too.
Yeah.
Not everybody's ready to be independent at 18.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that we recognize where kids are at. At the same time, I think most can be ready by the time they're 18, given enough preparation, Let's say your child is saying, I want to leave home. Maybe you ask, what's stopping you? What are your concerns about leaving home? Because maybe they really do want to leave, but they just don't have adequate income to sustain themselves out in the world. Maybe they did a little research on how much it costs to get an apartment, and they know they don't make enough money,
Yeah. And at that point, it's still not sort of a no-go situation, Maybe they have to figure out, or you can help them figure out too, how they can work with what they have. That's where it comes in. Like, maybe you'll live with a roommate. Maybe you'll work on getting a better paying job. Maybe you will stay here for a while and we'll establish a timeline and you save up a certain amount. There's all sorts of ways. Maybe your kid wants to move right into their own house, So maybe it's a situation where they're gonna stay and save. Maybe they do have a good paying job, but they're gonna stay and save until they're able to move out in the way that they want to, and that also fits with what your needs are too. So yeah, a conversation is important. Like, what are the barriers? And you may tell them, oh, well, owning a house as soon as you move out might not be realistic, depending on what their education is so far, or what sort of skill set they have. So yeah, just a conversation to help them plan is really a good thing.
And I think it is important, like you were saying, to help kind of create a timeline with your young person to help them see, how they can progress over time. Like, first, you need to focus on increasing your income, and then, you know, um, working on your credit score, or, you know, then doing a good housing search, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you can get your own place,
Right. And setting expectations and sticking to them, what the expectations are within a flexible framework. So what do I mean by that? You kind of create a timeline, and here are the expectations of when each sort of measure will be met. But maybe your kid comes to you and says, "Hey, I need a little bit more time," and it's a reasonable request, and they have a good plan for how they're going to reach that goal. Yeah, you can be flexible within it, and shift the timeline slightly, but everybody should be clear on what the expectations are. I'm glad too you said the thing about, like, maybe they're working on their credit score. The literature did point out one thing, that this is really valuable, that you're modeling the type of behavior that you'd like for them to be able to achieve on their own, right? So, and if you're tremendously in debt and you're not doing a great job of paying your bills on time, and they're seeing that, they may not sort of believe you when you're telling them that's an important thing to have
Sure,
under
Mom.
control, right? So yeah, you need to model those behaviors.
So, you say, what do you do if they still won't leave? Like, you've helped get their independent living skills up. You have talked about the barriers to their leaving. You've created a timeline and helped them figure out, like, the steps to getting independent, and they're still home. What do you do? So,
Go ahead.
you could discuss the reasons why they're not leaving, because there's got to be some reasons, right? Maybe there's some mental health issues that are getting in the way. Depression, anxiety. These things are actually at their all-time high in Gen Z, and those are the folks who we're talking about, right? Gen Z kids are now the ones who are starting to launch, and yeah, there could be serious mental health issues they need to address before they're really ready to be independent. So maybe you help them search for the right kind of services that they need: therapist, psychiatrist, whatever.
Yeah, and even if it isn't sort of serious or even mild mental health issues or that are at play, acknowledging that their fears are legitimate. There's apprehension of leaving home and leaving, like, sort of a safe, comfortable environment. So yeah, help them work through those barriers if there are legitimate fears. Yeah, and so once you've now we're still getting to it, like, so, but once you've kind of exhausted all those things, and you just have a kid who, if there isn't serious mental health issues that are creating a barrier, and they're just digging their heels in and wanting to stay just because it's easier to stay, but you're really feeling strongly that they need to leave. And then, as we talked about in our last podcast, your relationship is perhaps starting to sour, because they're there and just, not wanting to leave. I think a step before this is to just make, as I said earlier, to make the home as inhospitable as you can. You can incrementally, like, increase the rent, make sure they're paying rent, make sure they're doing, significant household chores, significant ways to contribute to the house. You can make it so they're really sort of wanting to live on their own sometimes, just by kind of making it so it's not as comfortable. to live there as it previously was. Even if you have like, maybe you started out doing their laundry, maybe it's like, oh, well, when you're going to be on your own, you're not going to have you're not going to have a washer and dryer. So maybe, you need to make sure you're making enough to do it at the laundromat. I don't know. Think creatively, ways to make it without being cruel. Just give them a kind of a taste of what it might be like to be on their own. And then lots of kids wind up, sometimes just when you suggest paying rent, lots of kids are like, I'll pay rent elsewhere. They don't want to even pay rent. So just sort of up the ante on what, you need them to be doing and contributing to the home.
Yeah. I had an adopted child who just would do anything but pay rent at our place. It was so funny. Like anytime I would bring up rent, she was just gone. Like crickets. Like, where'd you go? Yeah. Thankfully, most of my kids saw the wisdom in pitching in, but it's a hard thing. And I think that if you have a child who, for whatever reason, is really resisting leaving home and you're ready for them to go, it's important to create a contract with them, outlining the timeline, the limits, all of the details, like you would if you were a landlord, except for that, of course, you love and care about this person and you want to make sure that any barriers are addressed before they leave home. I was talking about creating a contract with your young person. You also want to make sure to have a specific move out date that they're working towards, because I feel like unless you do, they can just keep manipulating their way into staying, like over and over again. So yeah, I think that an end date is a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And actually, there's something we didn't mention before. This may be a big concern for you too, that you want to make sure that they have before they leave. Make sure that they have employment that provides health care. You don't want to have a situation where your kid's out on their own and you're having to kind of kick in for health care or, some sort of a situation like that. So many parents feel the kid, I guess the less that you feel like you're going to be there as their absolute, always their safety net, they're going to be more independent and on their own. So the things that you think you're going to be concerned about, like healthcare, maybe make sure that they have that in place. And the literature suggests, like, don't just ask them, like, hey, do you have healthcare? Really check it out for them. Like, look into it. Like, do they really have healthcare? Yeah. Because they may not think it's as important, but you may be feeling apprehension because they don't have it.
Yeah. A lot of times now that they have those healthcare cards, young people will just get those because they are often free from employers, but then they don't understand that there are limits to that, So, it's important to investigate what kind of health coverage they do have. But a lot of people I know now, they are able to cover their kids till they're 26, so they just do.
Yeah. So we're getting back to it though. Okay, we've gone through all of these things. We've given them support. We make sure they have health care. We make sure they know how to cook for themselves and take care of themselves. And we've started it from when they're young, or we started it when they were older, whatever, but they just still won't leave. And your relationship is starting to sour. What do you do? What do you do then?
Well, I think as a very last resort, it's time to file for eviction. Unfortunately, if you're living in the Bay Area like we are, or other places where there are really strong tenant protections, you can't just ask your kids to leave anymore. You actually have to take legal action to get them out of the house. And I know this because unfortunately I've had a couple friends who had to do that, right? And it sucks. They didn't wanna. They tried everything else before they took that kind of action. But, that's what you have to do sometimes. And I think that there are some kids for whom pushing out of the nest, so to speak, is necessary. It might not be the majority of the kids. In fact, I doubt it is. But there are some who need that push, and they're not going to go by themselves.
Yeah, and absolutely. So this is like, we're not advocating this by any means as like your first try. We've said all the things that should be the first options, right? But this is for a relationship that begins to sour because your kid is still living there. You've maybe made requests and they're non-compliant. So, here's our timeline. They're disregarding it. They're ignoring it. Here are the things that you've said you wanted to do, but they're not making steps to make it happen. They're not taking an independent action. So yeah, that eviction as a very last option, but also, as Sue said, tenant rights here, and not, I wouldn't say unfortunately, because lots of people need, good tenants' rights, but it's, back in the old days, parents would just tell their kids to leave and they had to, but not anymore. So make sure you check the laws wherever you are, so that, you're doing it, and be totally transparent with your kids. Like, this is the step that I'm planning on taking next. And maybe, just like with some kids, asking them to pay rent is enough. Letting them know that that's on the table might be enough, because you don't want your relationship to become permanently damaged with your kid, but also too, you don't want to feel like you're being taken advantage of. If you're really wanting to leave, they're really capable of being on their own, yet they're just with you because it's easier and it's free.
Yeah. And sometimes, I saw one family where the adult child was being physically abusive to the mom, and she just felt like she couldn't tolerate that. And I agree. I don't think you should be putting up with any kind of abuse from your children, but least of all physical abuse.
Yeah.
Then it's really time for them to go.
Right. And it escalates to that point because because maybe there's just too much kind of once they've been allowed to kind of stay so long, they feel sort of entitled. Like, how dare you ask me to leave? This is our house, and for so long it was our house, but really it's your house, and so, that's a hard shift for them sometimes, so. Yeah, so we don't recommend this as a first step, as we, can't stress enough. But if you've exhausted all the things, you've given all the support, you've given all the help, and then it becomes like a soured situation, this may be what you have to take with, knowing what laws are on your side, Yeah.
For sure. And if you ever need help sort of sorting this out, we're happy to work with you. We both do life coaching, and you can go to hopefultribe.com and schedule us.
Yeah, and I also in particular do young adult life coaching, because sometimes you need a little extra help with these things that your kids need, like making a budget, like even executive functioning skills. And so, yeah, we do that kind of work with our life coaching. So if you ever need any help.
All right. Thanks so much for being here. If you stayed to the end, God bless you.
All right.